My name is Zav, and I am 64 years old. I have lived long enough to know that life can surprise you in many ways, but nothing could have prepared me for the day my own family locked me out of the house I built with my bare hands. The moment that changed everything started with a simple phone call. It was late afternoon, the sky turning orange as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees in the small neighborhood park. I had been sitting on a wooden bench, enjoying the quiet, feeding crumbs to a few sparrows that hopped around my feet. Retirement had given me something I never had before: time. Time to breathe, time to think. My phone vibrated in my pocket. When I looked at the screen, I saw my daughter-in-law's name. I answered with a small smile. "Hello." Her voice came through the speaker, cold and impatient. "We changed the locks, and you don't live here anymore." For a moment, my brain refused to understand the words. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. "You heard me," she replied flatly. "The house belongs to us now. You should find somewhere else to live." Then the line went dead. Just like that. No argument. No explanation. No respect. Only silence. I sat there on the bench, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling as if the ground beneath me had suddenly disappeared. Because that house wasn't just a house. It was my entire life. The dream I built. 40 years earlier, that land had been nothing but an empty patch of dirt. Back then, I was a young man with tired hands and big dreams. I worked as a mechanic during the day, fixing broken engines and rusty trucks. At night, I worked security at a warehouse across town. Many nights I barely slept, but I didn't complain. I had a purpose. I wanted to build a home for my family. When my wife, Maria, was pregnant with our son, I promised her something. One day, I told her, holding her hand, "Our child will grow up in a home we built ourselves." She smiled and said, "I believe you, Zav." And I kept that promise. Brick by brick, year by year, the house slowly took shape. I mixed cement myself. I carried wood on my shoulders. Sometimes friends helped, but most of the work was done with my own hands. The day we finally moved in, my wife cried tears of happiness. "This is beautiful," she whispered. It wasn't a mansion. But to us, it was a palace. The tree. The day my son was born, I planted a small tree in the front yard. I remember kneeling in the dirt with the tiny sapling in my hands. "This tree will grow with him," I told my wife. And it did. Every year it grew taller, stronger. And every year my son grew alongside it. I taught him how to ride a bike on that same driveway. We played catch in the backyard. On summer evenings, we would sit on the porch eating ice cream while my wife laughed at our silly jokes. Those were the happiest years of my life. But life, as it always does, moved forward. Loss. 10 years ago, my wife passed away after a long illness. The house suddenly felt bigger and quieter. Her laughter no longer echoed through the halls. For months, I walked from room to room feeling like a stranger in my own home. But my son helped me through those dark days. "Don't worry, Dad," he would say, "you're not alone." I believed him. I truly believed him. The new wife. A few years later, my son introduced me to the woman he wanted to marry. Her name was Laura. She was confident, stylish, and spoke with the kind of charm that made people trust her easily. At first, she treated me kindly. She called me Dad. She cooked dinner for us. Sometimes she even asked me about my younger days. When they married, I welcomed her into the family without hesitation. "Your home is my home," I told them. And I meant it. The changes. For a while, everything seemed perfect. But slowly, small things began to change. Laura started making comments about the house. "This furniture looks outdated. The walls need new colors. Why is everything so old-fashioned?" I didn't mind renovations. The house had aged after all. But what bothered me was the tone behind her words. Then one evening during dinner, she said something that made my heart tighten. "You know, Zav," she said casually, This house would feel more comfortable if it belonged only to us. My fork froze in my hand. I looked at my son, expecting him to say something. But he remained silent. That silence stayed with me long after dinner ended. Erasing the past. Over the next months, Laura slowly began reshaping the house. The furniture changed. The curtains disappeared. Even the paint on the walls became different. One afternoon, I noticed something that broke my heart. The photographs of my late wife were gone. I found them stacked inside a drawer. When I asked Laura about it, she shrugged. They make the house look depressing. I didn't argue. But that night, I sat in my room holding those photographs, feeling like a guest in the home I had built. The phone call. And then came that phone call in the park. We changed the locks. The words echoed in my head as I walked slowly back home. My heart beat faster with every step. When I reached the house, I saw the new lock on the door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Finally, the door opened slightly. My son stood there. He couldn't even look at me. Behind him, Laura crossed her arms. "You can't come in," she said. My son finally spoke, his voice weak. "Dad, maybe you should stay somewhere else." "Somewhere else," I whispered. Laura answered for him. "Permanently." The cold night. That night, I slept on the same park bench where I had received the call. At 64 years old, I had nowhere to go. The wind was cold and my back ached. But the pain inside my chest hurt far more. I kept replaying every memory of my life, wondering where things had gone wrong. Had I been too generous? Too trusting? Too blind? Then suddenly, something important came to mind. The house documents. The truth. Years ago, a lawyer had warned me. Never transfer your property while you're alive. I had listened to him. The house was still legally mine. The next morning, I visited him. When he heard my story, he shook his head in disbelief. "Zav," he said firmly, "they cannot do this to you." For the first time since the phone call, I felt hope. Justice. A week later, I returned to my home. But this time, I was not alone. A lawyer stood beside me. So did a police officer. When Laura opened the door, her confident smile disappeared. My lawyer calmly showed the legal papers. "This property belongs to Mr. Zav." Her face turned pale. The officer spoke firmly. "You cannot lock the owner out of his own home." For the first time since I had known her, Laura had nothing to say. I walked past her and stepped back into my house. The air smelled familiar. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. A hard decision. I turned to my son. His eyes were filled with shame. "Why?" I asked quietly. He looked down. "Laura said it was best. She said we needed our own life." I nodded slowly. "You can have your own life," I told him. "But not in my house." Within a month, they moved out. Peace returns. The house became quiet again. But this time, the silence felt peaceful. I placed my wife's photographs back on the walls. I repaired the old wooden porch. And every morning I sat outside drinking tea, watching the tree I had planted the day my son was born. It had grown tall and strong. Just like he once had. The return. 6 months later, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, my son stood there alone. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said softly. "I should have protected you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. Because even though doors can be locked, a father's heart rarely stays closed forever. Moral of the story. Respect is the foundation of every family. Homes are not just built with bricks and wood, they are built with sacrifice, love, and years of hard work. And when people forget the hands that built their home, they risk losing something far more valuable than a house. They risk losing their family.